The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
You can be pro-Palestinian, you can be pro-Israeli. That's great, but the most important thing here is to actually be pro-human.
In the summer of 2021, a Middle Eastern restaurant in Toronto's West End called the Haifa Room started out as a takeout window. It has grown into a beloved dining spot. Run collaboratively by Palestinian/Arab and Israeli/Jewish owners, the Haifa Room offers a menu rich with flavors from their childhoods. It's a place where food transcends cultural, political, and religious divides, creating what the owners hope is a harmonious dining experience. And we're now joined by 2 of the 5 co-owners who are trying to share a recipe for peace. And they are Fadi Hakim, whose father is Palestinian from Haifa, and Mark Kupfert, whose grandparents were Holocaust survivors who came to Canada after the Second World War. And we are delighted to have you 2 here in this studio for a conversation that I can hear and imagine our viewers and listeners already saying, there's no way this works. There's no way this works. So we're going to find out about how this works. Okay, Fadi, how did this all come together in the first place?
One of our partners, Wasim, he basically kind of came to me at one point, and he's like, you know, I've always wanted to open up a Middle Eastern restaurant. At the time, this was during COVID, I had been a restaurateur since the age of 20. I'm 52 now, so for quite some time. And I've always wanted to open up a Middle Eastern restaurant, and it just seemed like the right time. Wasim was the right person to do it with. So in that sense, I brought on my partner Joseph, who we already have collaborated before, and then Wasim brought on Mark, who I'd not known before, as well. And so I met Mark, and then things kind of went. It was just easy peasy at that point, just everybody getting together. And so we opened up during COVID. It was a small takeout window. We wanted to do a dining room, but we couldn't do that because of COVID, obviously. So that basically then the media kind of took it as we are Palestinian and Israeli owners. And suddenly it just kind of became this thing.
Sheldon, put the picture up if you would. And Mark, maybe just take us through this. Here's your gang. Who is everybody here?
So on the furthest left is Daniel Suss. He's also one of the partners. That's Chef Jason Hemme, who spent many years cooking in Tel Aviv. To the right is Wasim. So Wasim is basically connected us all. His family is from Akko, but he.
That's northern Israel.
Yeah,
right?
Northern Israel, but then they moved to Lebanon. And then on the right is me, and behind us is Fadi.
And where did the Haifa Room, that name, where did that come from?
So Fadi's father, well, one thing, Fadi's father was born in Haifa. Mm-hmm. Is that true? That's true.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was born in Haifa, yeah.
Yeah, and then Haifa, I guess I'll say, well, imperfectly, it's considered one of the best examples of coexistence between Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews.
And more than that, actually, it's the world headquarters for the Baha'i faith as well.
Right.
So you got a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on, and you know, even when when the October 7th tragedy and continuing war occurred, there's been town halls where the mayor had both communities come together and say, you know, no matter what's going on, we live together.
This is in Haifa?
Yeah. There was a video, and I can send it to you after, of a town hall of just kind of reaffirming that message that we live together, we share common humanity, and let's not let this situation, you know, divide us.
Well, Fadi,
Yeah.
that's a wonderful sentiment, obviously, but how do you make that actually happen in your day-to-day lives?
Well, I mean, that's obviously it's That's an interesting question. It's not easy. It's basically like anything. I mean, since the conflict started, I basically start my day, with the news, and obviously seeing what went on while you're asleep, and so you kind of start the day, thinking about that. Maybe a little angry, whatever it is, but then kind of once you get to work, and once you start any of the calls, any time that you speak to any one of the partners, whatever the case may be, we are friends first. So it's very difficult to, we will share our ideals and all of that sort of thing, but at one point somebody has to talk to a bread supplier. So it's the idea that you basically have to kind of get over any of your problems, sort of work together, and
All right, but I'm going to ask two hardball questions here.
Yeah, sure.
Here we go. Mark.
Yeah.
How do you not look at him at some point during your day and not think what quote unquote your people are doing to quote unquote my people on October 7th is making me furious, and I just can't. I can't work with you anymore? How does that not happen?
I mean, I think first and foremost, the Haifa Room the project was that we share a common humanity. And I think what's happening right now is both sides are extremely polarized, and we're losing that humanity. And no matter what, I look at Fatty and I see a human I love, I work with, I get along with, and no matter what, in what happens in the world, we're still face to face, looking, hanging out, working on this project together. I actually think we mostly agree about the situation. Where we get a lot of flack on Instagram, both sides. People are like, the Jewish side is saying, oh, the Haifa Room is pro-Palestinian, and what does that mean? Are we pro the Palestinians having security, dignity, and prosperity? Yes. Are we pro-Hamas? No.
Okay, let me ask you the obverse side of that question, which is, how do you not have, at some moment in your day, a moment where you're thinking to yourself, I can't work with this guy because what his, quote unquote, his people are doing to, quote unquote, my people in the Middle East is beyond the pale?
Well, I mean, it's a difficult thing, right? Because I was born here. I was born in 1972 in Parkdale in Toronto. So, I mean, yeah, of course, I'm first generation. My parents immigrated, in 1970. So when all's said and done, and I was kind of talking, I was thinking about this before, that I grew up in the 70s in Parkdale, not easy for an Arab to do at the time. Tons of racial slurs being, thrown in a schoolyard. But interestingly enough, a few of the people that threw those racial slurs back in the day, I'm still friends with. The idea here is that I think we are blessed being Canadian, being born here. We see things, unfortunately, fortunately, we see things, through a little more of a humanitarian lens. We're sort of forced to be together, and within that, I think that you start to see commonalities more so. Inevitably commonalities come out.
I bet you one of the things that you have in common is that you probably heard the odd slur during your time growing up in Montreal.
No, not directly to me. And I just think this whole situation, it's so important that for us to just talk and not reach these kind of levels of intensity where it's just impossible to have a conversation. And I think with social media, it's just we're in echo chambers, and it's really hard to have these conversations.
Well, let me probe that a bit more.
I think a lot of people, even from my side, are saying I get messages of is Haifa Room pro-Israel? I'm like, absolutely. Just like there's 500,000 people demonstrating every night in Tel Aviv against, the current government. I agree with them. I agree with Chief Gadi Eisenkrout and Benny Gantz, and even, sorry, I'm forgetting the head of the opposition right now. But
you want to make a distinction?
Yeah, you're well, that you can support Israel, but also be, think that there's another way of dealing with the situation. And so, I just want to make it clear that we are pro-Israel, or what that means is we believe that Israel has a right to exist. Fadi believes that.
100%. I mean,
And however, both sides need to be able to live in security, prosperity, and dignity. I just want to just make that clear to everyone who doesn't.
Right. Hadi, on October 7th, when the news became known, what did you say to your Jewish partners?
oh boy, like I remember that time. It was difficult because I think the first day, literally the first morning of October 7th, the second that happened, CTV News showed up at our door and basically said, "What do you think?" And we're like, "What do you mean? What do you think? Would you like some hummus?" Like, we don't know, we don't know what to say here. Like, we are not experts by no means. Yes, we absolutely live together. We work together. All of that sort of thing. But when all said and done, we struggled with it because at that point too, with social media, everybody was releasing statements. Everyone was saying, this, that, or the other. We didn't know what to say because we obviously had to speak about it, and at length we did. It was literally a 48-hour conversation.
Among the 5 partners?
Among the 5 partners, absolutely. And it wasn't easy. And of course, what we distilled from those conversations is a simple thing. And I think there's just a lot of sentiment of this happening right now as well. I think there was I kind of like Nicholas Kristof, the columnist for the New York Times. We had him on last week. You had him on last week? Yeah, there you go. He has a great idea. It's such a simple notion of the fact that, yes, you could be pro-Palestinian, you could be pro-Israeli. That's great. But the most important thing here is to actually be pro-human. And that's sort of where we got to. So what we released for social media at that point in time was that we are disheartened, and any sort of violence towards anybody anywhere is just not right. And I think that is the simple message that we have to do. It's not the Haifa Cup here. It's not pick a flag. Like, it's not going to. Someone would have to win then. It's not going to make sense. It doesn't make sense to both sides. So we have to find a way.
Well, let us remember that at the end of the day, you guys are running a restaurant. You guys are feeding people. And you probably would like to be better known for how you do that as opposed to your views on international affairs. So can we actually talk for a little bit here about how you do what you do? For example, deciding on the menu. I gather you had 38 tastings to get the right falafel?
Yeah, it was disgusting. It was a lot of falafel.
How does that work exactly?
We basically, we created a spreadsheet. Everybody got in. I remember our partner Joseph was like, "Oh no, a falafel is supposed to look like sand in a desert," and Mark is.
I want it more fragrant and herbaceous and green inside.
Yeah. And then I kind of liked, my father's one. And we kind of...
And we're still not satisfied.
Well, let's show some viz here. Sheldon, bring this up if you would, clip 1. We're going to take a look at the building of a perfect wrap. Okay, somebody take us through all this. What are we looking at here? Go ahead.
That's a laffa.
A laffa?
It's a laffa, yeah.
What's a laffa?
A laffa is...
okay, you got the pita bread on the bottom.
Well, it's actually called laffa. It's an Iraqi kind of, I guess it's kind of a saj.
Yeah, it's like a saj, but it's based on a Persian flatbread, and it's about 14 inches in diameter.
It's huge.
It's massive.
Yeah.
Wow. And you got all sorts. What do you got inside that?
That is the beef kebab. Sorry.
So
and then of course you get to choose everything.
Chopped salad. You got the pickled cabbage, tahini, hummus.
Did you guys come up with that?
Oh, that's pretty traditional.
Oh, it's traditional.
A laffa is laffa. You get if you're in Israel. There's many laffa shops everywhere.
How are you sourcing all of this stuff?
Well, it's a funny thing because laffa is traditionally more so. Okay, so Haifa, in the region of Haifa, one of the most exciting things about it is it's street food because Palestinians and the Jews have lived together for so long and so many generations, they've intermingled. And so they have some of the most exciting street food. Like, for instance, when we first opened, Mark said we have to have sabich on the menu.
Have to have
sabich, it's called. So this is a weirdest.
Yeah,
it's not weird.
It was
amazing.
It was brought by the Iraqi Jewish immigrants to Israel. Is like almost a breakfast food, which is pita with eggplant and egg. But it's become just a very common street food sandwich in Israel.
And it has a thing called mango, an amba sauce, which is like a spicy mango sauce.
What's it called again?
It's called amba sauce, and it's
sabia?
Sabia,
yeah.
Is that a Hebrew word?
Yeah, probably, or I mean.
And what does it mean?
I think sabich means morning, actually. Yeah, it might be an Iraqi word.
Okay, yeah.
Arabic word.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I should learn the semantics of it. But yeah, and it's mixed with amba sauce, which is a mango chutney that has fenugreek in it. So it's kind of like, it's an interesting, but it works with the tahini and so Fadi had it for the first time. He's like,
unbelievable.
Yeah, we got to put this on.
I literally had it for a week straight, and then it was like, oh my gosh, it's absolutely delicious. So I think that that's sort of the kind of where we kind of come from, and what we try to do. We play with a lot of flavors, play with a lot of tradition as well in the food, and kind of discover it. So and it varies as well. We could go to Moroccan. We've gone that way. Our chef and the partners have always, kind of pushed the ticket in our dining room.
When we were deciding the menu, one of my favorite things that you said was, I want the menu to be like Palestinian mountain cookery. Like
once we get ox tongue
like village food,
then,
and I was like, yeah,
we'll really
that's exactly.
yeah.
I'll eat that. I want to eat that all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that, just.
Do you get when your customers come in and obviously, if they've arrived, I think they probably understand the unique makeup of the ownership team. What kind of comments do you get?
Yeah, boy. I mean,
I think overall very positive. I think ultimately, I think people do want to look at other people with full humanity and hope that there's a better alternative than the current situation. And I think that even though this is in Canada and it's an idealized situation where we both grew up very privileged here in Canada, it's at least like some glimmer of something, of inspiration, of hope that, like you're asking your people. No, we look at each other as humans first and foremost, and we have to just keep that focus, our shared humanity and our shared love of the same food.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people do get that vibe and enjoy it. Of course, there's polarizing, groups that want to know our take on our side and what's our opinion, and do we have like an official opinion, and want us to get political, and we're just like, well, no, we're just serving you, good hummus, and come eat it with us.
Is this phenomenon, and I will call it a phenomenon because let's face it, 99.9% of what we're seeing and reading and hearing in the media these days about Israeli and Palestinian or Jewish and Arab interaction is awful. And you seem like the one little oasis of something hopeful. Fadi, is it exportable, what you're doing?
Well, I mean, since, we opened during COVID, like I said, in Toronto, and then we did actually open last November in Vancouver. Which has been great. It's been fantastic. It's a superb response to it. Everybody loves it. It's been accolades all around. I remember we had to get a press agent though, because we were supposed to open up in June, and then of course we opened in November, and we were like, oh boy, this is gonna suck. Like there's gonna be a bit of a media storm around this, and so we literally had to sort of get representation to sort of.
Sheldon, roll the clip for a second, if you would. Clip number 2. Let's see what this is. Fadi, Joseph, and Avi taking a bite out of the wraps.
Yeah. Wow.
Ari, excuse me.
That's Ari, yeah.
And
Yeah.
So Ari,
where's that restaurant?
So this is kind of our new fast service one, and this is just Yonge and Eglinton, just at 2116.
Oh my gosh.
It's just
right
down
near
the
here.
street. Yeah.
How long's that been open?
Yeah.
It's opening. It's soft open. It's really opening this week.
Okay.
That's why you have to come after this and try it out.
I'm definitely going to check
That's
that out.
Ari, so that's our partner
Right.
in that venture, with Joseph, who's our partner from Haifa, who, his family was Jerusalemites for like 8 generations. Something crazy.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I'm going to be a customer before long at that place because you're in the neighborhood. And secondly, keep it going, guys. Good luck.
Really
Good
appreciate
luck.
it, Steve.
Fadi Hakim, Mark Kupfert.
Yeah.
Salam alaikum. Shalom to you. There we go.
We're here at Isna, Canada, one of the most vibrant mosques in the GTA. Today, we're joined by members of the mosque to discuss the profound meaning of community during a time where a global Muslim family is grappling with the harsh realities of war and conflict. We're here in this beautiful space here at ISNA. So why don't you tell us first about what ISNA is exactly?
ISNA stands for the Islamic Society of North America. This is our headquarters, so you're getting to kind of see where our main space is. The main thing is trying to serve every facet of the Muslim community, whether it's the need for food banks or the need for counseling or just the need for people to kind of come together as a community. We kind of try to serve all of those different needs.
So it really is an all-in-one.
That's the hope. That's the hope.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, how are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for joining me here today. You play a big role here as well as the sheikh. So for those who might not be familiar with what a sheikh is, can you run us through that?
A sheikh is a community servant, an advocate, a friend, a teacher, an educator, a helper, and occupies many roles. So we do counseling sometimes, we do chaplaincy, we do hospital visits. We're there when people are getting married. We're there when people are getting divorced, trying not to get them divorced. And we're there, of course, to lead prayers, the 5 daily prayers, the sermons. So an imam is somebody that keeps the glue to the community, that brings people together and helps them stay together.
So you're really wearing all of these different hats.
It's a blessing. It's humbling, and it's also a lot of pressure. People look up to you, so you have to hold yourself to a high standard. You have to always be available in the best way possible. So at any moment you can expect a need, you do have to step up. So it's very humbling, but also very, very rewarding as well.
Palestine is on all of our minds when we come together as a community, in the prayers that we make, in the, where people want to donate and where they want to support. It's on all of our minds. And I think this year more than any year, that's why you see the community coming together with such strength and such intensity, because we all feel like we're hurting. And when you're hurt, you want to hurt together, and you want to come together and be like, I feel what you're feeling. We're going through the same thing. What can we do to make it better? And I think, you don't need to have family in Palestine. You don't need to have someone that you know in Palestine to really feel the hurt. But there's a lot of people in this community who do actually have family in Palestine, and that they want to feel that everyone is with them, that they know what they're going through, that they feel for what they're going through, and that, the community hasn't forgotten them, even though we're miles and miles away.
A lot of us were thinking about our community across the globe in Palestine and what they're going through. For those who might not know, what is happening in Palestine? What are these people going through?
It's unbelievable. It's horrific. Because you have people who are being uplifted, uprooted from their homes. The physicians that we know that are on the ground describe the horror. The people that we have there as family, they tell us on a day-to-day basis that it's just absolute horror, absolute violence. My Jewish friends that I believe to be holding on to a genuine understanding of Judaism, we have conversations all the time, and we've come to a healthy point where we understand it's not about the faith, it's about the way that people misuse and misrepresent and sometimes project their own political ambitions and desires onto their religious ideology. And we know Muslims have done that in our own history and our own tradition, and we should learn from these. We should learn from these mishaps and misunderstandings.
I think it's great that you said you're sitting down and having conversations with people like your Jewish friends, and because I think the importance is to realize that this is a humanitarian issue at the end of the day, and we're all on the same team. And we see that even though this is happening across the globe, it's making such an impact on these little communities everywhere else.
I think each and every one of us feels a little bit of guilt. I can tell you stories and stories upon stories, and it's just very sad to hear these stories, and it's very close to home. Because my wife herself, she's Palestinian. Her family are from Gaza, so she's half Palestinian, half Egyptian. So when we're sitting and having those dinner conversations, we're hearing about this family that has faced this difficult horror. This family who's lost 20 people in one day. Imagine burying 20 of your family members in one day. A hospital who has doctors, subhanAllah, who are being prevented from doing the work that they should. It's very heavy and it weighs down on us. So you can call it survivor's guilt, you can call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, it's just difficult to smile. It's difficult to enjoy even the basic moments. Like subhanAllah, I remember when my 3-year-old daughter, she was hearing me and my wife talk about this, and then she says to me, "But Baba, if they don't have food, if they're struggling, just send them Uber Eats. Just let's order some food for them." But of course, there are many challenges and difficulties in the way. And sometimes when I see my children, when I am having that personal moment with them, and I see their innocence and I see their happiness, they're running around, there are moments where tears come, to my eyes, and I think there are people out there, fathers and mothers, who have been deprived of that, who've had to bury all of their children, right? We hear stories of people saying, families like a mom and dad, parents saying, we need to figure out whether we're all going to sleep together tonight or whether we're going to separate. Muhammad will sit here, my other son will sit there, my daughter will sleep there, because in the case that we're bombed, maybe there's a chance that we have at least one survivor to tell our story. And then they have to balance between that representation, someone surviving to tell the story, or maybe it's better that we all just, face the same fate, so that there's no one left to carry that burden or to carry that emotional heaviness. So those are the conversations and the decisions that, they're making on a day-to-day basis. And then here we have all these luxuries, all these privileges, all these blessings. So yes, we want to use their pain as something that propels us, not limits us. We don't want it to cripple us, but it's difficult sometimes. It's difficult sometimes to be resilient, to have productive sadness. There's sadness which propels you to move, to advocate, to work. It gets you up each and every single day. It gives you purpose. It reminds you of why you're here. It reminds you that there are very, very difficult prejudices that people have. There are very bad assumptions that people make about us being Muslim, about Arabs. And so we have a lot of work to do. So use that energy to do good, to change people's misconceptions, to be ambassadors of goodness, and to be reason that people see Islam for what it is, not for what it is portrayed as. Our job is to help people process this in a way that they don't just generalize and otherize other communities. Oh, everyone is like this. Oh, that problem, right? Muslims are like this. Christians are like this. Jews are like this. No. Let's step back and let's not make these sweeping assumptions, and let's try to understand the history, the context, the politics, and let's try to work within the parameters to do good and to bring communities together rather than push communities apart, while at the same time standing firmly for the justice of our own community, right? The voices of our own community, because that is something that, of course, matters to us, and we feel it's a responsibility to have their voices projected and heard.
What role does faith play in dealing with everything that's going on?
So faith gives us an entire repertoire of stories of healing, stories of overcoming trauma, stories of resilience. Faith gives us a lens through which we're able to understand why this is happening. When God loves people, He tests people to bring them closer. So faith allows us to see what's happening as a reminder to check ourselves, to renew our intentions, to check our priorities, to focus on that vision, that mission that we have to do good and to leave a legacy of goodness behind. So faith has been very instrumental in allowing us, of course, to not only cope, but also understand and heal, and also use it as an opportunity to propel and to do, again, to do as much as possible for the people that are being affected by this, directly and indirectly.
I've been a rabbi at Holy Blossom Temple for almost 26 years now. I came straight from rabbinical school. Holy Blossom Temple is actually the first synagogue of the city of Toronto, founded in 1856, so older than Canada. So I would say since October 7th, it's been a very trying time on many levels. The focus of our work has had to change. You know, during the pandemic, we learned how to pivot. Well, this is another pivot. And we're finding strength in community. We're finding strength in friends and allies. And we also draw strength from our history, knowing that as a people that has been discriminated against over centuries in many lands, we have stores of strength to draw from our ancestors, and we tell those stories, we retell those stories, we study our own history, and that can also be a great source of strength. We have to spend a lot more time now on practical things like security, right? My friends at churches locally say their security budget is $0. We didn't need as much before, and now we really have to pay attention to those systems to keep our people safe. How else has my work changed? Much of what I teach and preach now is about resilience, is about coming back to our core values, knowing what is the Jewish way, how to find our way forward, how to know who we are and to know where we come from and to know to whom we belong, to know what we stand for, to know what we won't stand for. All those questions need to be asked again. And there isn't just one answer to any one of those questions, but those are the conversations that our people are having now. So I think it's very important at this time for people to know who they are and to be able to articulate what's important to them and what they value. And in Jewish life, there is a constant tension between the particular and the universal. So what do I mean by that? We are a particular people. We are a very small people, and we have to take care of one another. And so it's only natural that whoever you are, you take care of the people closest to you first, your family, your town, your group. That's only natural. But of course, in Judaism, we never stop there because we believe that we are responsible for the entire world. At the beginning of our Torah, the very first chapter says that human beings, every human being, is created in the image of God. And so we are accountable for one another. And I think if there's one thing I wish more people knew about Judaism, is that yes, we do have a special allegiance to one another as a people. It never stops there, and we are constantly thinking about how we can contribute to the world through generosity, through research, through the arts, through academia. And I think Jews throughout our history and across the lands have shown themselves to be dedicated to a wider purpose and a greater mission beyond our own particular people. I would love for Canadians to realize that they each have a role to play right now. Most Canadians don't like what they see in hateful rhetoric, in violence, and they're really upset by it. I've heard people say, I don't recognize my city, I don't recognize my country, that Canada was always a peaceful place before, and now I'm frightened by the news of the day. So what is the response? It's a grassroots movement. We cannot leave everything to the police and the courts and the elected officials. We need parents and teachers and grandparents and neighbors and faith leaders to be able to say to one another, I think a line has been crossed here and I'm not comfortable with what you just said. Or, a small act is not a small act if it's hateful. It's actually enormous. We shouldn't let anything slide now. We have to do it in a way that, of course, that doesn't publicly shame anyone. That's very important. But privately and rooted in relationship, we need to be able to look each other in the eye and say, this is not okay. this is actually taking us down a very dangerous road. And because I care about you, I'm going to help to draw you back to a path that is more peaceful and more about compassion and righteousness. Some of the people I have the best conversations with these days are taxi cab drivers. They see everything, and they've heard everything. And once they hear that I'm a rabbi, all of a sudden they tell me their truth about Canada, about other places they've lived. They're saying things like there's one humanity, and that many being newcomers to this country have said they know when someone is acting humanely, and they know when someone is not. They can read people very quickly. I think it's a skill that they've developed through their life experiences and through their work. And so they sort of have a bird's eye view on our culture and our society, and they can see things more clearly than some of us can. We've lost the skill set for thinking slowly, thinking carefully, taking a question and turning it and seeing many aspects, many sides of the equation. I mean, and you know, there are many cultures all over the world where the culture is to favor slow conversation, where you take your time over a cup of tea and build a relationship and build trust and listen carefully and integrate new ideas into your thinking. We've lost that. How can we de-escalate the violence that we've seen in the last number of months here in Canada, really coast to coast? I believe that everyone has the right to demonstrate peaceably. That's core for our democracy. And I believe that there should be a low threshold for accepting hate speech and violence. I really think we should be able as a society to draw those lines. And again, they can't only be drawn by the police and by the courts. It has to come from a grassroots response where people are self-correcting one another. To say, you know, for faith leaders to say to their people, this is not acceptable. For elected officials to say, we will not stand for this. The police, you may have reported on this, that in recent months they're more willing to make arrests than they were before. And that came from somewhere, that directive, that instruction, that was a decision that was made. And so I think part of what we've seen over the last number of months is leadership trying to decide where that threshold is, right? What is permissible and what is considered to be dangerous and even criminal. Whether you are people of faith or people without faith, we all have a role to play now. And I feel very strongly that we shouldn't let anything slide. If there's something that happens in our child's school, we need to make it our concern. If there's something that happens at our neighborhood coffee shop, we need to make it our concern. If there's something in our workplace that we overhear, you know, just a flippant comment that is hateful, we can't let that slide, because that then becomes the culture that we should be very tolerant of our diversity and celebrate it, but we should not tolerate intolerance. And I think that has to come from everyone in every corner of Canadian society now.
For National Hockey League players, winning the Stanley Cup is the ultimate goal. And besides securing immortality, tradition states that each winning player and coach gets to spend a day with the cup, pretty much anywhere in the world. On the Cup's official summer tour, the winners welcome family, friends, and their hometown community to join in their celebration. Broadcaster Jim Lang shares these stories in his new book. It's called My Day with the Cup, and he joins us now with more. It's great to see you again, Jim.
It's great to be here, Steve. It's a pleasure.
It occurred to me, I have something in my office that I keep on my desk that it seems appropriate for this interview.
Do tell. Uh-oh. Now, you're allowed to touch that one, but we can't touch the real one. You know, that's the rules.
I understand what the rules are, and we will get to that. Jim, one thing that I read in your book that I really did not know is that there's not really a Stanley Cup. There are actually 3 Stanley Cups.
Yes.
Explain.
So the Hall of Fame is very protective of the original Stanley Cup, and so it's in a glass case in the Hall of Fame, and all the names of the players and coaches go on there, Steve. But then they have the second cup, and that's the one that Phil Pritchard with the white gloves, the head curator of the hall, will bring out to the ice. So the captain gets it and all the celebrations. So that's a presentation cup, and that's the one that goes around and tours Northern Ontario and the Maritimes and Europe. And then they have a third cup because the cup is in demand so much and is in so many places. Sometimes they need an extra cup, but the one never ever leaves the hall.
Let me circle back to the first thing you said, which is it actually just a superstition, or is it an actual prohibition that if you're a player and you haven't won the cup, you don't touch it?
It is a deep-seated belief and a cardinal rule among everyone in the National Hockey League, Steve. If you play it or coach or on a team, and your name is not on the Stanley Cup, you don't drink out of it, you don't touch it. Absolutely not. It is, and it goes back generations to older players from the 70s who might have been in the Hall of Fame who never won a cup. They will not do it. And it's amazing, and the keepers of the cup have witnessed events where they've been there with the champion and they had a friend in the league from the same hometown, invited them up. They absolutely will not come up near the cup.
We got a bunch of pictures we're going to show throughout the course of our conversation. Sure. Here are Phil Pritchard and Mike Bolt. That's Phil on the left, Mike on the right, and they are known as the keepers of the cup. Jim, what do they do?
It is an amazing undertaking, Steve. They, first of all, after the Stanley Cup is awarded and they have the parades and the celebrations, an email will go out and they have to start deciding who gets the cup, when, and where. They have limited time for all the people, and approximately 50 people on the team will get a day with the cup. Personnel, front office people, the scouts, and the coaches and the players, and priority is given to the coach, the GM, the captain, and the star players. And then if I'm like a 7th defenseman or a 4th liner, I might get it a Wednesday night, and you're the captain, you'll get it a Saturday night. It's that kind of thing. So they have to organize that, and they have to do it geographically. And then they found out early on, in '95 was the first year of the official Cup Tour, the Devils, and they had one person, and by the end of the summer, they were catatonic. One person can't do it. So they trade off. So you might have the Ontario-Quebec swing, then you get a few days off, and then I would take over the Manitoba Prairie swing, get some time off, and then maybe you would go back on the third leg, which is Finland, Sweden, and Slovakia. And that's literally how they do it, like a rock band, and they split it up geographically and building in the travel that it takes to get from all these different places.
So let's be clear. I mean, if you are from Russia, if you're a Russian player on the Stanley Cup winning team, you get to take the cup to Russia for a day. Yeah. What's the furthest it's been?
The furthest it's been is with Vladimir Tarasenko, who, when he was with the St. Louis Blues, he was from a town 4.5 hours east of Moscow. So that's Mike Bolt mentioned that's the furthest east they have been. So they've been.
I read the book, so I know the place. Novosibirsk.
Thank you.
That's where it is.
Yeah. So and in the middle of nowhere, and it's been to San Diego. It's been to. It really has been to everywhere, and the amount of mileage it's logged into Afghanistan for goodwill tours, for troops and everything, and you can wherever the players from, wherever they call home, that's where they'll take the cup.
Do we know, I know 1994-95 was the first year it started, yes. My Day with the Cup. Do we know how it started as a tradition?
It started because there had been some informal times where the cup had gone out to a nightclub or a bar or a party, and it was getting banged up a bit. And Gary Bettman, to his credit, he takes a lot of heat. He decided, let's work with the Hall of Fame and the NHL and do something proper and supervised. Have it show up in the road case, come out in the white gloves. Let's go to Clinton, Massachusetts. Let's go to Burlington, Ontario. Let's go to Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Let's let them spend a day with the Stanley Cup. And that was the start of it. And that was for just to make it a proper tour. It's good for selling the game of the NHL, selling the game of hockey, and quality control. They knew that there was someone watching over it to make sure nothing bad was going to happen.
Sheldon, photo number 3, please. You may know this guy. I believe his name is Sid the Kid. Well, I think that's his nickname.
Yeah.
Sidney's got his name, Sid Crosby's got his name on the cup 3 times?
3 times, yeah.
3 times, which is not bad. And there he is in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, small town. What is it like for a Stanley Cup hero to bring the cup to a small town?
It's the biggest thing to happen to the town. First of all, let me tell you something about Sidney Crosby that maybe people don't realize. When he's not playing, he's working out and training to be better the next year. That's kind of individual he is. That's why he's had the career he's had. So it took well over a year before I was able to contact him and agree for him to talk to me. And at the start of the conversation, Steve said, look, Sid, I know you're busy. I just need 10 minutes, please. And 30 minutes later, he's still going. And he could not be more proud of being from Nova Scotia. His family from Cole Harbour. He had an uncle who was, or grandparent who was in the veteran seniors home in Halifax, who was a veteran. All this, everything that is Nova Scotia. He is so proud to be from Nova Scotia, and he cherishes the seconds of every day that he had with the cup. And he said to me, he said, every day in this off season, if I'm tired or sore and I'm going to the gym or skating, all I'm thinking is, I want another day with the cup. And it means so much to him. And Mike Bolt tells a great story. And then Sid confirmed it, that at the end of his 3rd day, Sid looked at Mike Bolt and said, do you have to go, really? And unfortunately, they're on such a tight schedule. He said, no, Sid, I have to take it.
We got to go.
We got to go.
Here's an excerpt from your book. This is Mike Bolt, quoted in My Day with the Cup. When I open up the case and I take out the Stanley Cup, I often see the father of the player or his grandfather get very emotional. I have gone into events with the Stanley Cup and I could see people in the crowd tearing up. The Stanley Cup is a rock star and it has a certain aura about it. There is nothing else like it in the world that has that kind of attraction and magnetism and emotion attached to it. You've got some lovely stories in the book about what some players do with the cup when they get their day with the cup. And I think one of the loveliest stories, maybe you'll tell it here, Guy Carbonneau, Dallas Stars, 1999. What happened?
Guy, for my money, the best defensive forward they ever played in the NHL, and was towards the end of a fabulous career. And his father sadly passed away during the cup run. And he had vowed that he would take the Stanley Cup to his father's resting place in Quebec. And that happened later with Brendan Shanahan, where it was sort of an impromptu thing. But yeah, Guy, that was his day with the cup, is to have some fun, but then have a solemn moment with his mom and his family at the resting place with his father in Quebec. And the family, the bond of the family and the players, that's what I don't think is translated when you watch hockey on television, Steve. And it is so important to them, and they're so respectful. And Mike Bolt had mentioned that there are times where they're taking the Stanley Cup into the hospital room of a dying relative or the gravesite of a loved one. And that's, the keepers hover over like a hawk watching the cup. But when it comes to that, they will stand back. They don't need to be there watching the cup in those moments.
I can't remember who said it in your book, but somebody said, you know, winning the Stanley Cup is something that the player does, but the player's never alone because the whole family has supported them through that journey.
Yeah.
And one player said, I saw my last name on the cup and it reminded me, that's my name, that's my dad's last name, it's my grandpa's last name, it's my kid's last name, right? Everybody's in on it.
Yeah, that was Matthew Dandino.
Okay.
And, you know, he was a wonderful storyteller. And, but yeah, it hit him. Like, that's not just my name. And that's the genius of the Stanley Cup, Steve, is the last name of the family's on there. And the last person I spoke to was Nicholas Hague, big Nick Hague, 6'5" defenseman of the Vegas Golden Knights. In the beginning last year, they started a new tradition where they inscribed the names before the start of the Cup Tour. So that's a new tradition now. And his grandmother's 99, and she's in a wheelchair, but still pretty sharp. And her fingers don't quite stretch out, and she's running her finger, which is all crooked, along the cup, and says, Nick, why is my name on the cup? And says, Grandma, it's our name. It's always going to be on there.
Oh, my God.
And I looked over, and his dad is kind of helping the grandmother, and he's got tears in his eyes.
Jim, you're going to make me cry right now.
And
it's amazing.
And it's amazing. Larry Robinson, for my money, on the Mount Rushmore, one of the great players in the 70s and 80s, he didn't really, the first time, he won all those cups with the Canadians.
10 cups.
10 cups. So he won all those cups as a player with the Canadians, but it wasn't until he was an assistant coach with the Devils he actually got it to take it to his hometown, Marvaville, Ontario, a little farming community in East Ontario. And he saw these elderly gentlemen from this little farming community weeping because the cup was in front of them. He says, wow. And as he said, holy mackerel, it's the Stanley Cup. And all these players from all these different communities, from the US, from Canada, from Sweden, had the same thing, that people that they really weren't even related to them, but they were with them and had the presence of the Stanley Cup, and it really hit them.
Mike Modano, I guess he was captain of the Dallas Stars when
Absolutely,
they won?
he was, yeah.
Thrilled to win the cup, thrilled to see his name engraved on it, and he said, because it's going to be there forever. Now, here's where we have to rain on people's parade a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It's actually not going to be there forever, is it?
Well, 60 years. I mean, when you're a player, by the time the ring comes off, you may not be on this earth anymore. So, yeah.
But you better explain that. The rings come off.
Yeah, so they have to put new bands on it because there's so many names on the cup. So every 60 years, a band will come off and they have to put a clean band on so they can have room to inscribe other team names on it. And unfortunately for Leafs Nation...
Don't say it. Don't say it.
We're a few years away from that band coming off.
6 years, right?
No, less than that.
Less than that?
Yeah, because think 60 years. So
the last cup winner for the Leafs, which is 1967, that band is coming off in a few years.
Yes, it is.
There will be no evidence.
No.
Well, they put the ring in the Hall of Fame.
The ring's in the hall, but
yeah.
One of the biggest things when the cup arrives, and all the players talk about it, and the players become kids again. They're an 8-year-old kid again when the cup's in the room, and Sidney Crosby's like, my name's on the cup with Bobby Orr, and Andre Waugh was like, Mario Lemieux's on the Stanley Cup, and that's they were giddy talking about it, and they'd be able to go along and see the name of those idols, those players, really hit them.
Andre Waugh won a Stanley Cup with Tampa.
Yeah.
Who gave him a helicopter ride on his day with the cup?
Well, to me, it's the greatest story of a proposal ever. One of his best friends worked as a producer at RDS, the Francophone Sports Network, and said they were going from one town to another. And he goes, Andre, let's not drive. Let's get a helicopter ride. It'll be like 20 minutes. It'll save a lot of time, more day with the cup, more time to have fun. Oh, great, great. The helicopter lands in the soccer field outside of his town, and out comes Guy Lafleur in a pilot's uniform. And he's staring at him like, and Guy Lafleur was a licensed, experienced helicopter pilot. And so Guy Lafleur says, oh, congratulations, welcome, get in and like Andre Waugh's like, is this really happening? They get on the helicopter, and his friend had told him beforehand, why don't you propose to your girlfriend while we're in the helicopter? He goes, well, okay. He put the ring in the Stanley Cup and he convinced his girlfriend to look in the cup, and she looked and goes, would you like to get married? And so think about that. You propose in a helicopter with the ring in the Stanley Cup being flown by Guy Lafleur. No one can top that.
That's a perfect day.
It's a perfect day.
You and I have both been to the Hockey Hall of Fame numerous times.
Yeah.
We have seen the Stanley Cup numerous times. The last time I was in the hall, which wasn't that long ago, I asked it wasn't the keeper of the cup, but it was somebody who was watching the cup.
Yeah.
I said, am I allowed to touch the Stanley Cup? And they said, yeah, you can touch it. And then I said, am I allowed to hoist it? And they said, no.
No.
You cannot hoist it. You need to earn the right to do that. And I so respected that. But Jim, okay, Sheldon, put the picture up if you would. I couldn't help myself. I couldn't help myself. I had to hug it. I mean, come on. Since we were babies, we have wanted to hold that trophy.
I agree, Steve. But writing this book and hearing the stories and how profound it is to the players to be a Cup champion, how much it means to them. When I was with Nick Hague in his backyard in Kitchener and he had the Stanley Cup, I would not touch it. I stood by it for a photo. I don't feel I have the right to touch it. And just the men and women who have their names on there can lift it and touch it. And
you're right, and I respect your point of view, but I could not resist.
No, I get it.
And I asked permission.
Yeah. So now, one of the rules are when they have their day with the cup, it's funny you bring that up. Everyone talks about everyone drinking out of the cup. They want the players to hold the cup.
Yes. Which
Which sounds great. So even an elite athlete in the NHL, so you have one of these, usually the party ends with 2 or 3 hours of shenanigans and pouring champagne and beer in the cup. Well, the player is spending all night It's about 14 kilos, 34 pounds, filled
And
with...
it's hard to hold.
It's hard to hold.
Yeah.
And then, one of the individuals I talked to at security said, Nathan McKinnon, who's one of the biggest, strongest athletes in the NHL, he goes, my arms are locked. I can't do it anymore. His arms are locked up. And if someone wants a photo with the cup over their head, the rule is the player has to be on one end. So if I'm the player and we'll be holding it together. So it's quality control, but the drinking out of the cup, you don't just grab it and hoist it. No, the player holds it and pours it into your mouth.
Just finally, you and I both know, I mean, we follow sports.
Yes.
We know all the possible trophies that are out there to win.
Yeah.
You know, the Commissioner's Trophy and the Lombardi Trophy and that ugly Major League Baseball Commissioner's Trophy they win. Whatever you get for, what's that tiny little thing you win for winning the World Cup, the soccer thing?
Oh, yeah.
It's ugly.
I don't even know what it's called, yeah.
There is no more beautiful trophy in the world, I don't care what sport, than this. Correct?
You will never get an argument from me. And Mike Ricci talked about it, where they started the date at his mom's house in Scarborough. And the keeper, it wasn't Mike Bulb, I can't remember who the keeper was that day, but he said, just give me a couple minutes. And his mom and his brothers and his uncles and his family are on the yard, in front yard, waiting and waiting. And the keeper brought it out, and it was gleaming. And it was like everyone stopped. And people started crying, and there was something almost magical about it. And Fredrik Modin said that in Sundsvall, Sweden. And, Jordan Nolan talked about it, taking it to Garden River, the reserve, and near Sault Ste. Marie in Northern Ontario. And whatever community it's been to, whatever family it's been with, they've all had the same reaction, that there's a certain power to the trophy when it's gleaming and it's shiny and the names are on it and they're looking at it. And so many of the players said the only time they've ever seen their dad cry is when that cup was in the living room or in the kitchen, and they saw Gordie Howe or Bobby Orr, Guy Lafleur or Jean Beliveau's name on there, and they're like, my son's name is on the same name as, and it can be overwhelming, and it's got a certain appeal. And when the Commissioner Gary Bettman, that's the one thing I love about the NHL. There's no, when they win, it goes to the captain of the players, and then Gary gets off the ice. It's their time. And it's the hardest trophy to win, 4 7-game series. And at the end, they were so beaten mentally, physically, and emotionally, it almost doesn't sink in. The day it sinks in is the day they bring their cup to their house, they have their day, and they realize, I'm a Stanley Cup champion.
Jim, you have written a lovely book chronicling all of this. My Day with the Cup. Jim Lang has been our guest. Thanks a lot.
It's a pleasure, my friend.